Valorant finally launched on June the 2nd, meaning that those who hadn't played during the beta or just hadn't gained access were finally able to hop on, and with that comes a wave of new players who didn't get time to experiment with all the weapons as the rest of us did. What I've compiled here is a list of all the weapons and then ranked them in different tiers depending on what I think are the most effective and the ones that you should be looking to pick up during the game. I'm going to very quickly run through the D tier weapons. These are the ones at the bottom of the list, and that is the classic, the weapon that you start with. It does have some use obviously in the pistol round, and its right click ability, which is 3 quick bullets to the head, can be very good, but it is extremely situational. The other weapon would be the Ares. There's no real reason to pick this up. It is relatively cheap for something that has that much of an RPM and that much of a possible damage output, but realistically, once you're beyond the lower tiers of the game, you're very rarely going to see it. It has minimal control. It's basically a spray and pray cannon. Moving up to C tier, we've got the Frenzy. The Frenzy's quite a good pistol, but I feel that for the extra 100, you may as well go with the Ghost. The Frenzy is a fully automatic machine pistol. It does a significant amount of damage to the head and the body. Some people like this more than others, but for me personally, I don't really see much use for this. I very rarely pick it up. The next C tier weapon is a Bucky. For the price, you can get a Sheriff that's actually cheaper, which guarantees a one-hit kill headshot. The Bucky is only useful in very particular scenarios, and even then, it doesn't guarantee a kill on headshot because the bullet splits between the RNG pellet spread, meaning that you can get different damages depending on the shots, making it inconsistent. The next C tier weapon is the Odin, another LMG. At 3,600 credits, I don't see there ever being a need to buy this. You can get the best weapons in the game, the rifles, for considerably cheaper, and it's an LMG that, at the end of the day, as much as it puts out a massive amount of damage, if you hit all of your bullets, the chances of actually hitting them are so low that even the highest tier players refuse to go anywhere near this weapon. The final weapon in C tier is one I'm expecting to be rather controversial, and the one I'm expecting to be disagreed with most, and that is the Bulldog. I know quite a few people personally who really like this weapon, but I personally don't ever see a need to pick it up. Most people do when they're between the level of picking up an SMG or a rifle, when their economy is at that awkward point. But what I personally think I would rather do is pick up an SMG and buy all of my utility over buying a Bulldog and little or none utility. Moving up into B tier, this is where the vast majority of weapons lie that I would recommend picking up. There are 2 tiers above, but they're for the standout weapons, really. The first one in B tier is the one that I'm expecting to be the most controversial here. This is the Shorty. Now, in my stream, we've got something of a Shorty appreciation club going. We really like it. It's a fun weapon to use, but for 200 credits, it's also extremely effective. You're only going to be using this, really, during pistol rounds or high economy rounds. On the defense side in particular, it's an incredibly effective weapon. During the economy rounds, people's tactic are often just to flood a site. During pistol rounds, during economy rounds, as such, what you're able to do is put yourself in a corner and clean up 1 or 2 quite effectively. It does obviously have some drawbacks, number 1 being the range, number 2 being that it only has 2 bullets in the mag. The second B tier weapon is the Stinger. This is a brilliant weapon for economy rounds. It is an SMG that has a fire rate like none other. It only has 20 bullets in the mag and actually puts out 18 bullets per second, which means you empty it in about 1.2 seconds if you just hold down the trigger. Meaning that anyone within close range gets absolutely shredded before they can fire back. And it also, in ADS, has a 3 burst, which is, in my opinion, better controlled than the 3 burst of the Bulldog. Bit weird, but it seems to work that way for me. Its phenomenal fire rate, as well as the fact that it's only 1,000 credits, means it's a very useful weapon and deserves a place in B tier. Next up would be the Judge. This one nearly ended up in C tier, but I do think that it is better than the Bucky. I do feel that there are better options for slightly more money or less money. You get yourself in a good position, you can put out a fantastic amount of damage with this weapon, and I've seen it used especially during economy rounds or pistol rounds and being very, very effective. So as much as I probably don't recommend this weapon as much as other weapons in this tier, I also feel like it doesn't deserve to be in the don't ever consider list. Next up is the Marshal. At only 1100 credits but 202 damage to the head, it is a brilliant little sniper rifle. It also does over 100 to the body and slightly less than 100 to the leg, meaning that in the economy rounds in particular, if you win the opening economy round and then you go into the anti-economy round, the Marshal is fantastic at cleaning up people who've put on no armor or a light armor, which you see a lot of. I highly recommend it. It is also very, very useful for keeping people at a distance, which is useful during, again, economy, anti-economy rounds, because most weapons during that period are short range. The final B tier weapon is one that nearly snuck into A tier, and it was only really the cost of it and the fact that it is lacking a little bit of versatility that drags it down into B tier, and that is the Guardian. At 2,700 credits, for slightly more, you can get yourself a rifle, which has way more versatility and, in my opinion, are the ones that you should be picking up over the others. The Guardian is a brilliant long-range weapon for when you want to control a long lane or a straight sight without being able to afford or wanting to splash out on a big sniper rifle, but it suffers from some other negative characteristics. It's not great at short range. It's okay. It's not awful, but it's also not great. There's better options. Especially in ADS, it seems to suffer extremely heavily from bloom, and when you're in ADS as well, it suffers from a lot of flinch. If you don't land the opening shot in the gunfight, you don't hit the bullets, you're then really, really struggling to get back on point. It's a weapon that I expect to see a lot at lower tiers, but not at higher tiers. Moving up into A tier, these are the weapons that I highly recommend and the ones that I typically buy when I'm able to, and we're going to start off with the Ghost. The Ghost is a fantastic choice during pistol rounds and is the one that I pick up the most often. It maintains a high fire rate whilst giving you more precision and packs more of a punch. You get headshot damage for just over 100, and in the pistol rounds at least, typically that will either gravely wound or kill off an enemy. The general range that it possesses is more than everything except for the Sheriff, and I find that it is very versatile. Next up is the last of the pistols, and that is the Sheriff. At 800 credits, it would consume your entire budget on the opening rounds, meaning that it's not necessarily one I would pick up during those early first two rounds. I find that if you're going to pick it up and go in with zero armor, it's just a big investment. Especially if you are a support character, this weapon is really not available to you. I highly recommend using it actually during the later rounds when you're just looking to save your economy. The fact that it drops a one-shot headshot anywhere up to 30 meters and then pretty much a one-shot headshot anything beyond that makes it incredibly useful, especially at only 800 credits. If you're a high tier, good aim, very good at flicking player, this weapon is going to feel amazing to you and incredibly satisfying. The third weapon that I'm dropping into A tier is the Spectre. This is the last of the SMGs. It is a fantastic weapon and honestly seems to outshine where it should probably be. It is obviously fantastic at close range, don't get me wrong. At point blank range, a Stinger's probably going to beat it, but anything up to 15 to 30 meters and it is a fantastic weapon. It's always going to require 2 shots to the head, but it's got a very high fire rate, meaning that any headshot can typically be followed up with a second or cleaned up with some bodywork. The one thing that I've seen it do quite a lot actually is land consistent blows over a longer range, meaning that it can actually compete with rifles up to a certain point, and it seems to compete well with the rifles even up until the point where they can out damage deal unless you're headshot by one of them. The final weapon in A tier is the first that we've spoken about, assault rifles. There's only 2 assault rifles in the game, and the one that I have put into A tier is the Phantom. The Phantom is a fantastic weapon for those of you who are trying to learn the spray patterns and how to use an AR in Valorant, as it is much more forgiving than the other assault rifle. However, it does have some serious drawbacks. The one-shot headshot potential only goes up to 15 meters, meaning that it can often be outclassed by other weapons in a headshot potential fight. Also, the fact that you're using an assault rifle and then headshotting someone but not killing them up to 30 meters or further means that you can be outclassed by long-range and short-range weapons plenty of the time in between. To try and compensate for this, it's got a slightly higher fire rate than the other AR, meaning that in the lower tiers, this is one you're going to see quite often. It's forgiving, it's got all these great parts about it, but once you start to get to the higher tier precision levels, it's going to be outclassed by the Vandal, especially when you consider that they both cost the exact same amount. Moving on to the final tier, and this is S tier. For me, these are the weapons that you should absolutely buy if you are able to. If you're unable to use these weapons, I would highly recommend investing all of your time in getting to a point where you're very good with them, because these weapons are capable of deciding and changing games. The first weapon is, of course, the other AR, which is the Vandal. Now, the Vandal is less forgiving. The first 3 bullets are pretty much on point, and then it has quite a bit of a kick. But if you can learn to control that, it is a one-shot headshot at any range. It's big on damage dealt when you hit pretty much anywhere. It does have a slightly slower fire rate, but it doesn't seem to massively then decrease during ADS, if that's what you'd like to use. For me, the Vandal goes over the Phantom purely because of that one-shot potential, especially when you get to a point where you're able to control the spray, where you're working at the higher levels, when your mouse placement improves. This is the weapon that you want to be able to use over the Phantom at the exact same price. This is the gun that will be the central figure of the game, in my opinion. And last but not least is the Operator. It's basically a 1-for-1 of the AWP from CSGO. It will one-shot pretty much anything unless you hit them in the leg, and quite frankly, it can decide the game. The amount of times a very good Operator user will completely steamroll an opposition, it will shut down pushes, it can deal with multiple people at once, it can collapse. It does so many amazing things. It is a big investment at 4,500 credits. However, if you are good with it, it is worth every single penny. I would go as far with this weapon as to say that no matter what weapon you're carrying at the end of a round, if you've killed an enemy Operator, do everything you can to retrieve that weapon for your team. It is brilliant on attack, but it is even better on defense. Definitely going to be the standout damage dealer in the game, and quite frankly, the iconic weapon that comes with this series. That's it, that's all the weapons in the game. I've ranked them from D tier to S tier based on the weapon usage, the cost, as many factors as I could possibly think of, really. I want to know, more importantly, if you guys agree. What do you think? I know there's a couple of controversial ones in there. I'm pretty sure that there's going to be some definite disagreements, but which way do you go? Do you put the Phantom over the Vandal? Do you have the Operator in S tier? It is a 4,500 splash at the end of the day. What do you think of my Shorty and Bulldog placements? Do you have serious changes, or do you agree? If you could drop that in the comment section below, as well as leave a like and subscription, that would be amazing. Thank you very much for your time. Take care. Best of luck.